let's move on to how the media is covering themselves in glory, really. It's a scary time. Let's be honest, right? The Delta variant, nobody really knows what to believe.
Yeah.
Many people got vaccinated. People are like, wait, is it not working? You're seeing all these headlines. The media's job is to tell you what's going on. And some people, for reasons I won't understand, still really trust the media. And they look at them, and the media is telling them, you should be really afraid. Now the CDC is bringing back its mask mandate, and I think there's a lot of problems with that. But still, it's the CDC. It's like when you see it in a movie, you're like, I'm supposed to trust it. And we are seeing a total and complete breakdown of reliable and good information coming from the CDC, coming from the media, so much so that we have a total and complete cluster. Let's throw this up by the Mediaite, because I thought they actually did a pretty good job here. NBC News, the New York Times, and the Washington Post all independently called out on the same day for horribly irresponsible framing of COVID cases in fully vaccinated people. And let's give you an example. Ken Delanian, who is a world star idiot over at NBC, CIA scribe, decided to start writing about COVID. So here's what he says. Exclusive. At least 125,000 fully vaccinated Americans tested positive for COVID. Oh my God, that's scary. 125,000 out of how many? 145 million? 150 million Americans? It's one of these things where when you think about it statistically, you're like, wait, that's actually nothing. Also, how many of those people got hospitalized and died? Oh, so you have a 99.999% chance of survival from any sort of breakthrough case if you're fully vaccinated, and you have a 99.996% chance of not being hospitalized? Oh, that sounds pretty good odds to me. These people are basically trying to scare someone for no reason. The same thing happened at the Washington Post, which is their headline was essentially the same thing. They said, quote, CDC shows 3/4 of people infected in Massachusetts COVID-19 outbreak were vaccinated. Now, once again, they point to vaccination rates and even the cases without talking about hospitalization and death. All those people in that Massachusetts story, none of them died. 4 of them were hospitalized out of hundreds.
And by the way, this was an area with very high vaccination rates. So guess what? If there's very high vaccination rates, then you're going to have a high percentage of vaccinated people who are the ones getting it. That doesn't mean the vaccine doesn't work. And it's all intentionally scaremongering.
It's pure fear-mongering.
For profit. Fear-mongering for profit. And it is the best gift that they could ever give to anti-vaxxers.
That's the worst part. And I want to show you how bad things are. The White House is calling out the New York Times. So put this up there and keep it up for a little while. Ben Wakana, this guy is the strategic communications director for the White House COVID-19 task force, quote tweets the New York Times for those who are listening. The New York Times says the Delta variant is as contagious as chicken pox, may be spread by vaccinated people as easily as the unvaccinated. And Ben rightly points out in all caps, vaccinated people do not transmit the virus at the same rate as unvaccinated people. If you fail to include that context, you are doing it wrong. So things are so bad that the New York Times is exaggerating so much that the White House itself is saying, all right, everybody hold on a second here, okay? That is the level of insanity that we've reached. And so I alluded to these figures, but let me underscore them. Please throw up Andrew Kaczynski's tweet. Less than 0.1% of vaccinated Americans have been infected with COVID-19. 0.004% have been hospitalized. 0.001% have died. So let that sink in. 99.6% chance, 99.996% chance not being hospitalized, 99.999% chance of not dying. The people who are dying, who've been vaccinated, mostly people severely immunocompromised, had a lot of problems going on. So, and most of them are elderly too. So already on the brink, comorbidities. Everybody knows that side of the story. This is what bothers me the most. The media is essentially saying, and trying to build the case for the mask mandate and all this by undermining the case for the vaccine itself.
Yep.
If you're unvaccinated, and I have a whole monologue on this about who are these people who are not vaccinated. I went and I dug into the data from the Kaiser Family Foundation. The #1 reason for not getting the vaccine is it's too new and I'm gonna wait and see. Now, if you're in the wait and see crowd and you're not hearing this responsible reporting around dying and infections, and you're seeing, oh, I can still get infected with COVID, and the media is not telling me that infection is not the same thing as hospitalization and death, well, why the hell am I going to get this vaccine? I'll just get COVID and have the antibodies or whatever. And it's like, guys, I mean, they're blowing a massive hole in this, so much so that even the White House, who I think has gone way too far in embracing some of this public health guidance, even they are saying this is a total disaster, how the media has handled themselves this weekend.
Yeah, because their interest is in people feeling pretty good about the state of the country and that we're on the upswing, and that is the truth of the matter. And you're right to say, look, this is a scary moment. People are trying to figure out what's going on, what the risk is to themselves, going through this whole process again of reassessing, like, okay, where am I going to, my kids are going to go and play, what's going to happen with school open, all this stuff. Like, I get that that is very fraught and very tense, and this crap makes it all so much worse. To me, the most irresponsible one was the framing of this Massachusetts study and just putting out there without any of the surrounding context that more vaccinated people were getting COVID than unvaccinated. If you're just looking at that as just a headline, you're thinking, wait a second, so if I get vaccinated, I'm more likely to get coronavirus? That is the polar opposite of reality, and we know that that is the case. I mean, we've had how many hundreds of millions, possibly billions of people worldwide who've gotten this vaccine now. We know the data around what happens. You are dramatically less likely to get COVID. If you do get COVID in these rare instances of breakthrough cases, you are even more dramatically less likely to be hospitalized, and the chance of death is as close to zero as it could possibly get. That's the story. The story is the vaccines work, and all of these people scaremongering for profit and clicks should be completely ashamed of themselves. And by the way, hey, Twitter, where's their, misinformation label? Where's their ban? Where's them being entered into the, dystopian social media database where they all coordinate to give you the internet death penalty? Where's all of that? They jumped to when there was like some bad Hunter Biden story before the election. But this stuff coming from sources that are considered so trusted is completely disgraceful. And it also really does show you the double standard, because if some, right-wing nut job on YouTube had put this out, they probably would have gotten video would have been 100%. Demonetized, taken down, possibly kicked off Twitter, all that stuff. But because it's the Washington Post, New York Times, NBC News, they're just like, well, it's not great, but whatever.
Think about that Washington Post headline. Think about the Washington Post headline. Imagine some anti-vax guy on YouTube. He's like, you're more likely to get it if you get the vaccine than not. YouTube would look at that and be like, hey, this person is... It's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. It just so happens that these people are establishment. Also, I just want to say, by the White House's own standard, these people should be removed from all of social media, right? They've been spreading COVID-19 misinformation. They shouldn't be on Twitter. By all rights, by Twitter's own standards, Twitter should have taken that down, or at the very least labeled it misinformation, but they're not going to do it. And I would be remiss if I didn't say this was happening at a time of terrible ratings for the media. Frankly, Delta is the best goddamn thing that ever happened to them. They miss Trump so much. They have been trying to make him happen. It just refuses to start. They try on CNN, all of this. Delta is the best thing that could have happened, because now they need to gin you up so you have a reason to watch again. Try and think back to the early days of the pandemic. I, like many of you, I don't even have cable. And I had to go out there, try and find it on YouTube. I was trying to live stream the press conferences. It was a scary time. We didn't know anything. I remember a time when I was like, hey, this Dr. Fauci guy, let's hear what he has to say.
Yeah.
And it was important. It was like Deborah Birx. They have this guidance, 15 days to stop the spread. I'm sitting there glued to my TV. That's big business for people. They made hundreds of millions of dollars whenever you were afraid and you were sitting there in your house and you're just sitting there clicking. And now that they've got people conditioned to that, but they're losing people on the margins, they need it to come back. That's what leads to these irresponsible stories. Because I bet you that Ken Delanian story got a lot of traffic. There are a lot of wine moms out there who are like, oh my God, 125,000 people. That's so many. They don't know anything about the statistics. I've seen a lot of discussion around children. I mean, if I don't once again read a story about how, oh, this like obscure case in which a child who had all of these horrific health problems, I'm not diminishing this, died from COVID.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry for those people. And if you know somebody about there, I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
That being said, if you go and you look at the statistics, your child is not at risk from Delta or from COVID of serious illness or death any more so than any other like random childhood illness. The media reporting on this, I saw the New York Times or CBS News say, COVID's more infectious than Ebola. And I was like, oh, yeah. I mean, Ebola spreads through blood and, like blood and literal bodily fluids. Yes, COVID spreads through the air. It is more infectious than COVID. I mean, infectious than Ebola. You're right. Why would you put that in there? That doesn't mean anything.
It's also dramatically less lethal. I mean, that was always the thing. Right. That was the thing that was initially scary about COVID is like, if you have Ebola, there's no mystery that you have Ebola.
Like you have Ebola, you're gonna die.
Entire insides are coming out of you, and there's no like, oh, let me go to the store. I mean, that's what from the beginning was worrisome about COVID. But you got to put that in perspective of like, okay, well, what's the death rate? And oh, by the way, if you get vaccinated, you're gonna be fine. So why don't you go out and freaking get vaccinated? There you go.
Yeah, the reporting on this has just been so maddening because you're watching it shape public policy, and we're about to get to that, in terms of how exactly it is forcing people's hands, some of these mayors and more. I do believe they are acting in self-interest, and we're about to talk about that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Krystal, I live in, I've talked about this in the heart of like wine mom America, amongst all these upper middle class, rich white people, and they're all masking again. All of them are wearing the mask, and I went to a movie this weekend, and a guy complained to the manager that people were being sat side by side. And these are in one of those new movie theaters where there's like a lot of space between you. And he complained to the manager. I heard him say, well, what about the people who take off their masks when they're eating popcorn? He's like, why are you guys still? I swear to God, this all happened yesterday.
If you're that
it was
panicked,
like, don't go to a movie.
Just stay home. Just do yourself a favor. You don't need the stress. If you're that panicked, just stay home. But yeah, I mean, it's this kind of like, I don't know, it's this self-sustaining system where the media needs the traffic, and so they produce these fear-mongering headlines at least. Sometimes the stories are just as bad. Sometimes the stories have the context, but oftentimes people don't really read past the scaremongering headline. So you put that out there, you create all this fear in a group of people who have embraced like their pandemic responsibility as part of their identity and who just are freaked out and like want themselves and their family to be safe.
Yeah.
It creates this public pressure for the politicians to do something to keep us safe. And then you end up with bad public policy that the politicians themselves, as we're about to explain, know that is not really necessary, is not really called for, is not really appropriate in their own lives. They're not really following what they're telling the public that they gotta do. And so it's this horrific spiral, and you always have to keep in mind that the media's interest in all of this is to keep you as freaked out as possible. That doesn't mean that there's nothing to fear here. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't be taking Delta seriously, seeing what the data is, seeing where it leads. But we also know what the answer is. The answer is get vaccinated. The answer is let's figure out how we can get more people, encourage them, like give them confidence to go out and get vaccinated. And stories like these do the exact opposite of that end solution.
Yeah.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.